Welcome to the Agent Leader Podcast. My name is Brent Kelly, your host. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. I have a fantastic guest for you, the agency leader, today that I will introduce here just in a minute or two. But before I get to my awesome podcast guest today that you're going to learn a ton from and you're really going to like, I always want to share the mission of the podcast. The mission of this podcast is to help you, the agency leader, gain clarity, build consistency, and make a commitment to become your best version possible. As we get into this new year, 2023, hard to believe, right? Like 2023, I just feel like we're all getting older, but why does it feel more real when you really do feel like you're getting older, for whatever that's worth? As we get into this year, we are continually to seek out and to find qualified growth agency partners. And, I've mentioned this on some previous podcasts, but if you're an agency that's really looking to take the next step, schedule a strategy call with one of our coaches. We get to know you better, you get to know us better, and see if there's a potential fit for us to work closely with your agency to help you in all kinds of different areas in alignment and getting your producers producing, to understand the power of retaining and replicating a high level, and to give your agency a high level playbook that can be customized for your agency. So if you want to learn more about that, go to sitkins.com/experience, sitkins.com/experience. All right. I am privileged to have a guest, someone who I got a chance to meet this year. Didn't know each other before this year. I don't think so, right, Allison, that I'm aware of. So if she's like, my God, she forgot. No, we didn't meet until this year. And I had the privilege, I mentioned this on a previous podcast, of being part of the Agency Leadership Institute, which is hosted by Cincinnati Insurance. Reagan Consulting leads that. And I, as part of Sitkins Group, was truly honored to be able to present and share and have conversations with a great group of agency leaders across the country. And we had two in-person sessions, one in June, one in September. And not only was this person part of the group who had great value to share, and I know she'll have great value to share today with you, but she had the privilege, wait a second, no. I had the privilege of sitting at her table. She probably didn't have the privilege of sitting with me, but we were table mates as well. We had groups of 5 or 6, so I got to know her very well, and we had some great conversations. So without further ado, Allison Hammons is my guest here with Knight Insurance Group. She's a risk consultant, but I know you've got your fingers around different parts of the agency as well. So Allison, welcome to the Agent Leader Podcast.
Well, thank you, Brent. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I wanted to bring Allison on for a number of reasons. A, she's just really likable, which you'll get to know that right away. Just has a great personality. But I didn't share with you before we started recording here, Allison, but I just got a chance to meet so many different people as part of that Agency Leadership Institute. And I just loved your openness and transparency and just facing things like head on. This is something we're dealing with, and this is how we're doing it. And I learned a ton from you. I know the audience will as well. But before I get into some of those questions about you and what you're doing and some things that I know will be helpful to agency leaders, I'd love for you to share, how did you get to where you are today? Like, you're sitting there and what you do. Like, if you could share a little bit of a backstory and what you do today at Knight Insurance.
Yeah, sure. So thank you. I have actually been a part of the agency for almost 23 years. I was 8 when I started.
I love
it. So I actually started working at the agency. My first job was a receptionist, and I was 18 years old. So I was just graduated high school, and I am also a second generation. So my dad actually is in the business, and I work with my dad. His name is Sam. He's the president of the agency. So I, throughout college, actually worked at the agency. And so that's really kind of where I would say, the bug for the business. I was their first sales intern. So that is also where I got kind of the sales bug and thought, I think I want to do this. I was going to school for business. So I knew I wanted to do something business. I wasn't really sure. And so I went and actually worked for Auto Owners Insurance Company as a commercial underwriter first outside of college. And then I was ready to move on from that. And so I moved back to Toledo, and I actually called my dad and said, listen, I need to do something different. If I don't, I'm going to get out of the business. And he's like, well, I really think you should be there for 5 years. It's good to have that company experience. And I said, well, you're either going to hire me or I'm out. So,
Ooh, the ultimatum, right?
yeah,
No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
right.
In a good way.
I know. So in January of 2006, I actually came back full time to the agency, and at that time, I became full time sales, commercial sales,
Mhm.
and so I have been doing that role for over it's almost 17 years now. Um, have really enjoyed it, really work with a lot of really great clients. But probably about 2019, our CEO started coming to me and said, I want you to get more into a leadership role at the agency. And so we put me in charge of the business development unit, which was really the new people that were coming into the agency, new producers specifically. And what can we do to get them trained? How can we help them? Coaching and mentoring. And I also, myself and another individual in the office, came up with our playbook. So we have what's called the night playbook, and it's what we put our producers through, especially in that first year. So that was created. So I was helping coach and mentor people, as well as kind of put the behind the scenes stuff in place too, some of the detail stuff. And then I also became a partner in the agency just soon after that, after COVID started. And then there are now 6 of us that became partners, myself and Greg, who's actually another younger individual here at the agency. And so we were only partners for a few short, like 2 years. And then this year, we actually became 100% employee owned. So we now are an ESOP, and that happened on August 1st of this year. So I'm still on the executive team, and we meet, still to discuss about, what are we doing as an agency? What do we need? How are we moving forward? But I am still very heavily in my sales role and helping my clients grow and getting more clients, and then as well as what are we going to do to help grow our sales team. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I said you had your finger, so to speak, or your pulse on lots of stuff, right? And you
Yeah.
do. And so many of our agency leaders that listen and those that we work with at Sitkins Group, they're, very similar to you in the sense they're kind of that player coach, right? And
Mhm.
it's a really challenging role. So I love to get your perspective on how maybe you balance some of those things. And, also obviously, so many of our agency partners are second, third, fourth generation. And I always find it interesting to hear the story. Every story is unique, but there are similarities. And I got to ask you, and I don't know if this is true or not, so I just want to get your take. Did you ever have a point, and you said you started at 18 as a receptionist and kind of growing up around the business, where you were like, made a comment, I will never be in this business, I'll never do this, or did that never ever happen? Did you always kind of like, no, I like it?
I never said I would not be in the business or never
Yeah.
do it. I don't think I ever really. And my dad's been in it forever, and
Mhm.
he's had a really great career, and so
Yeah.
no, I never really thought that. I think he did.
Okay.
He's like, wait, maybe you should do something different.
I'll have to get him on the podcast as
Yeah,
well and get his take on
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly.
Great.
But yeah, no, I never really felt that way. And
Yeah.
then once I got into it, I was like, oh, this could be really great. So
Yeah, yeah. And obviously everyone's got their own journey, but it's interesting you're talking about like you did the company side, which was good, but you were you were very quickly ready to like do the other thing. But it is interesting with so many generational agencies that I know and work with of having that bit of just the company side. I think in one way, and again, there are a lot of ways you could phrase this, but I think it really does give you appreciation for what happens from the agency side of things, right? I think it also gives you appreciation for all the stuff that carriers do, but sometimes it can be taken for granted of how great this business is
yeah,
from the agency side.
absolutely.
So I appreciate you sharing that. So, all
Yeah.
right, I've got a few questions for you. I told you as we got into this is like us having a cup of coffee, and obviously we're virtual, and I'd love to be in person with you, but I got my cup of coffee here, just to get some ideas. And I ask these questions for the audience, but certainly I learn a ton as well. And I'm just curious, Allison, from your perspective, if I ask an agency leader, what's frustrating you? I typically could sit back and for an hour, you're like this and this and this. But I'm curious from your perspective, whether it's individually or as your team, or again, even as an industry, what do you see as your biggest frustration right now, or biggest challenge maybe? And what are you doing or your team doing to address that?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is finding people, which know that is a huge issue for many agencies, but finding experienced people, because that in that realm, it takes so much time and effort to train somebody. And I mean, we've done it. We've brought in new salespeople without any experience, or even customers on the customer service side, we've brought in new people, but it just takes so much time and effort to really get somebody going. And so it's so nice to be able to bring in somebody, but there's just not a lot of movement in that. And I think of myself too, when you've already got a book of business, it's hard to leave. It's hard to leave that comfort of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to start over. So we are trying to figure that out. One of the things we thought is like, okay, well, let's hire producers with books, let's buy their books so that maybe we don't have as much concern about that. Looking to still try and find experienced account managers, like senior level account managers. One of the big things that we did this year, and actually it came from some of the training, the ALI, we actually revamped our referral program, our employee referral program.
Yeah.
And so we now are doing $1,000 for an employee referral after they stay for 90 days. And then we added, if they stay for a year, then they're getting another $1,000.
Yeah.
So we did do that with one employee so far. We kind of kicked it off with her. And, so that's one of the ways that we're trying to hopefully maybe see if people know other people within the industry. I mean, some of these people came from other agencies. So that's one of the ways we're trying to combat that. I would say also for me on my own like business side of things with my sales is getting people to respond back. And it's not cold calls. These are people that like have sent an email or made a phone call on my behalf as a referral, or I know the person, like I know them, they know me. It's not cool, there's a relationship there. And so that's really been I've really struggled with that this year, probably within the last like even 6 months. It's been, why don't people respond back? What is it? And so one of the ways that I've been is just reaching out to other individuals that are not even in our same business, but maybe they're in like some kind of a business development role.
Yeah.
And say, hey, what are you experiencing? What are you doing? It's emails, it's calls, it's text messages. I've done all of that. What's something else? And so some of it's persistence, because it's just persistence and being able to do that. And then sometimes it's walking away too, like saying, all right, I've done everything I can do.
Yep.
If I can't, it's not going to move forward. It's not going to move forward. It's okay. Move on and get to something else. So those, I would say, are some of the things that I'm trying to change and experience different things maybe to try and help me get things turned around. So it's going to happen, you just have to be, but sometimes it's just frustrating. And then I guess lastly, I'm a full-time working mom. So, the balance of being there, I mean, the beauty of this job is I can, be there if my kid is sick, or if they have an appointment, or I'm not at work at 8 a.m. But it's also, tough because you're like trying to get so much stuff done. And when I'm home, I'm with my kids.
Yeah.
And my kids are young. I have a 3-year-old and an 11-month-old. So they need me, they're not as self-guided as maybe I would think so. But it's great. Like, it's wonderful. It's just the whole time management and being able to figure all that out and get everything done that I want to get done. So I would say those are probably my top 3 right now that we've kind of been experiencing.
Well, first of all, thanks for sharing. I mean, I'm sitting there going, I bet you there's some other people listening that go, I can relate to that, right? Maybe in some different ways, but similar ways as well. And in the last part, I know you just had because when we were there in June, right? I mean, new baby, the whole deal you're dealing with, and which is so awesome, and it's exciting, and it's wonderful. And I've shared with you, I got 5 kids. They range all over. By the way, them needing you, even when they get to college, doesn't, it changes different, but it's different. They just need you in
Yeah,
different ways, right? Yeah, I don't need your time. I just need your money, mom. So,
that's right.
right. But there is that challenge there. There's no doubt. And, I think what hit me as you said that is that, the great thing about the independent agency world is that it is flexible, right? Which is great. But it also creates challenges because you can work when you want, which can be good or
Hmm.
bad, right? Like,
Yes.
right? You can work when you want, which means, oh, I can go to that thing at 3 or the doctor's appointment at 1, which is fantastic. But guess what? I also can work when I want, which could be 9 p.m. or 11 p.m. or 4:30 in the morning, right? So
Right.
this, part of that is, and again, I'm not going to give any band-aid solutions to this other than we talk a lot about energy management, but it's just the biggest thing is, prioritize and be focused where you are, which is so hard because, it's like right now, and I get it, we're having this conversation. I have no doubt as a human being, you have a pretty good idea of what you have to do after we hang up this call, right? Like, right. So we all that way, but it's like, when you're here, you're here. And that's a huge challenge for salespeople and entrepreneurs
Hmm.
and leaders. And I want to share a couple of things too. And I don't mean to hog or steal from what you just said, but it's interesting because you mentioned the challenge of finding people, which is obvious. We had some, discussions at the ALI group, certainly about that. And I've had others on a recent podcast. I had Art Betancourt, who's part of
Hmm.
AE Betancourt, great guy, and had some
Yeah.
interesting solutions on that. But one thing that I'll never forget, it came up at our table. I think I asked this question to someone because I was just kind of sitting there listening as they're talking about all the different things they're doing for recruiting. And again, as you remember, there's a multiple different ways you could do this. And but I asked the question about, well, what do you pay in a recruiting service? And they're like, well, paying this and this and whatever. And I said, oh, well, what do you pay if someone internally that really loves your company, that's been there part a long time, and is a great internal recruiter because not because they know all the details, just because they believe in the culture. And it was like, oh, well, we only pay this. And I'm like, that was about it. And it was like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, you're right. Like, in essence, we're paying strangers way more than we pay the people that have been here that love our company. Now you got to be careful with that, right? And how that's facilitated. And you mentioned, after a certain period of time, and every agency's got to find their own thing. But it just, I think what I've seen, Allison, and some of the stuff that you guys have done, I know, in talking to you at night, is that really, yes, there's someone in charge of recruiting, but it truly is a team culture approach
Hmm.
that everybody in the team understands, obviously who we are and the people that we want and why we want them. And all of a sudden you've got people that are at a restaurant or at an event or at a bank, or I don't know, right? And they go, oh gosh, you're frustrated with your job because we have an amazing career opportunity. You should talk to such and such, right?
Yep.
Now, yeah, it's that takes time and effort, but I love what you're doing there. And so I
Yeah.
just want to
Thanks.
share uh any other comments on that. I don't mean, again, to take what you said, but
Yeah, actually, well, one of the other things too that really getting people engaged, and it actually came from some of we have 2 younger gentlemen that actually came to us. One came through an internship program when he was in college, and the
mhm,
other, I believe, was the same thing, intern. But we were talking about recruitment, and they wanted to create an internal recruitment committee. So we actually do have an internal recruitment committee too that I head up, that is made up of our employees. And so we get together and say, okay, well, what can we do? But it's also about giving them the tools. So this is what we're looking for. Here's the criteria, and saying, and the other thing too is giving them a little bit of a boost on, hey, here's, some gift cards, or here's some things like
right.
if you bring in, and they get a send their resume in or something like that. So I think that's awesome. Like, that is so cool that we have that, them wanting to take the initiative to
Mhm.
really try and help us grow. So the other thing we did, and we kind kind of stole it from another agency, but
You borrowed it. You
we
borrowed it,
borrowed
Allison.
it.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
in, well, I asked to borrow it.
There you go. Yeah.
They're out of Texas, but we have a business card that we made. And so let's say you are at that restaurant or you are, with a banker and they're not happy and they're just like outstanding. And you're thinking, man, they would be so great and they would fit within our culture. You give them this business card and it's got a QR code on it and they can go click on the QR code and then it takes them right to our website and they would put their information in and then we would send them information to talk to them. So it's and it says like you're a rock star. So it's another nice way. And that's a new thing that we've added just recently as well. So, and a lot of that came from what again, the recruitment and what can we do differently and that ALI leadership training. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I guarantee you right now, Allison, that if you're driving, don't do this. But for those that are sitting down and listening, go, whoa, that's a good idea. That's a tactical idea I could do. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to flip. I mean, part of that is an example of a success. So if you want to elaborate on that, you can in my next question. But obviously, in talking to you and what you're doing as an agency, you mentioned some of the things that you're doing. What do you believe? And again, this could be for you, could be your team, maybe even through an industry. But what do you believe? And you can look at this last year has been one of your greatest successes. Why was it a success? And what are you doing to maintain the momentum in that? Because that's something that can happen as you get a success. And the joke we always have in our trainings, Allison, is like, it works so well that I stopped doing it. Right. So
yeah.
What have you done that's worked? Why has it worked? And what are you doing to continue to make it work?
I would say that we're doing really well with culture. And I bring that up because I think it's really important because it's really what defines us as an agency and who we are and what we do for the people that we work with, whether it's, a home and auto client or if it's a commercial lines client. And everybody really lives it and breathes it when they're here and they work it. And so, yes, we are, a 40-person, company and we feel like a family though too. And so I think having those in front of everybody and really trying to share with everybody, what are we doing, how are we doing it, and that's been really successful. One of the things that I also added, we use Microsoft Teams as, of course, which many people probably do since COVID. We put in a praise board on Teams, and so now that is like anything. Someone completed a class and they received their CIC, or they did an outstanding job for a client and it was, outside of the box thinking, or they did something with I'm looking over here because we have our core values actually on our computer, something that they did that really just, made someone's day.
Yeah.
I mean, it could just be a kind word. And so that was something that we've added. And I think that has been just a really nice addition, but it's just a continuation of the success of our culture, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think that has been really one of the things this year that I like to highlight.
Yeah. It's one of those things you said this, like, I don't say culture is a buzzword but it's just culture. But I think, and I can see it too, Allison, and talking and working with different agencies. And, again, I think we're all in evolution, so to speak, of what we want the culture to be. And, whether your culture right now as an agency is, for lack of a better term, stinky, or it's like flourishing, right? There's always improvements we can make, right? The next step. And, we define culture as the language of behaviors that are normal in your agency. Right. It's what are people saying? What are people doing? Like, you don't have to make it confusing. Like, that's a culture. And it's just, but what I love about that, what you said, and there's a huge thing I want to highlight is, there's a quote that I share all the time in our trainings, whether it's with account managers or producers, and you hit it in a different way. It's this: silent gratitude is no gratitude at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Silent gratitude is no gratitude at all. And I think sometimes and this is not because I think agency leaders or agency personnel are mean or they've got malice. They're just busy and they're distracted, right?
Absolutely.
That's the way it is, right? And so it's one of those where like, oh, I really appreciate Allison doing that. But we just move on to the next. And then 2 days later, it's gone. And at some point, right? I'm just using you as an example. You're going to go, man, I've done a few things. Like it would be nice to be acknowledged for some of that. Right. And just little things, like it's amazing. And I'm sure you see this at night, right? When you guys do this, but it can be like, it could take literally 5 seconds and you just change somebody's day.
Yes.
Right. And then it goes back to like, and obviously being consistent. And we don't do this to manipulate, it's because we truly care about the people and want to acknowledge them and share their success. And I love the praise board to make it visible, right? That people can see that. But like, just think about think about dropping the pedal in the pond and the ripples, right? That analogy, like those things build. And then you wonder, like, why is my agency, or why is our agency more excited to bring in other cool people where some agencies aren't? Well, could have been because of a simple thing like praise, right? And we look at we have a lot of acronyms. I don't know if you remember this, Allison, but one of our acronyms is ART, right? The art of communication. And it's just, is there a level of appreciation? Are we doing things to respect the roles that we have within each other? Because the same goal, different roles that we have. And are we keeping our word that honors and builds trust, like ART? And things that people hear all the time, but man, we can forget about them if we're not careful.
Yeah.
So I
so
love
true.
what you guys are doing. I love
Thanks.
what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think it's just a nice addition to, what we're already doing. But you're right. So many times it gets done and nobody ever knows about it because they get so busy. And it's just like, we should let people know that like this person did this, whether it's this teeny little thing, it could be huge to that person. So I think it's really important.
Well, and I know we were talking before we started recording about getting out and seeing people and doing that, right? Which I think most people, I won't say everybody, like that or glad we're doing that. But especially like with some of the virtual stuff, still like there's a lot of things that go on. We typically look at the negative of things, which is fair. There's truth to that. Like, what aren't people doing? There's also what are people doing that sometimes no one ever notices, right? Or ever appreciates. And those are things that can definitely cause animosity and frustration over a period of time. It's like, I'm working my tail off here. And I'm not saying you have to, but boy, it'd be nice to be acknowledged for some of those things that I've done behind the scenes, so to speak, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So love it. All right. So I want to ask you specifically, you mentioned a few things. I'm curious to get your perspective because as we met each other through this Agency Leadership Institute, ALI, and Cincinnati, and Reagan, and Sitkins being part of that, what was your biggest takeaway? I know there's a lot of different things, and I had to interject my question here because I sat by you at the table. I always appreciate note takers, and so here's Allison. She's just blazing down notes, right? Then she's got stars and circles, and then you're categorizing. I'm like, oh, I love this. Like she's just thinking about this. So of all the stuff you wrote down and did, what's your biggest takeaway from that program?
Oh gosh, my biggest takeaway. The first thing that kind of pops into my head is that we're all in this together. There was so much that you could take from other people. Like none of us are perfect. Yeah. Nobody's doing everything, great. Everybody has an avenue that they want to like grow in. And I think, like we're doing some really great things, but we're also not doing other things that great. And so being able to be there and hear what another agency is doing and be able to like also help each other. Why would you try and recreate the wheel? There really is no reason to, especially if it's, people are willing to help you. And I know you got to think about competition and whatnot, but none of these people were in my realm of competition, right. Being in the same, state or whatever. But I just think that we're all in this together, and if you need help, it's there for you. And I knew that, but I think it even just became even a little bit more visible, and I think just like credible for me too. I learned so much from that training, so it's really hard to say like what was the one big thing, but I think just being able to be a part of that and see that like we are in this together. And if you need, I would love if someone contacts me and says, hey, can I talk to you about this? I'm like, yes, absolutely. Like, how can I help? And so Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I took away.
I love it. I know it's a hard question because you put all the days together and all that.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff, but I think you really hit on something important. I know I've shared this with different people or different episodes of this podcast, but I mean, what I wrote down is the power of the collective genius. It's a term that we use all the time. And again, this is a bit of, this is a different question, but I mean, what we do, and there's other places that do it as well, but what we do in our Sitkins network, a big part of that is we align people to have conversations. They go, I'm not the only one dealing with this. Right.
Yes.
And whether it's through a coaching call with me or, for example, or having a direct conversation with someone that's part of the network, they're going, oh, not only am I not the only one, but there might be other people that have potential solutions for things that I'm struggling with, or I may have potential solutions for stuff they're struggling with, right? We all have our chinks in the armor. I think you said that is really, really well. And here's another thing that's interesting too. It just like with our network and ALI, I mean, there were agencies from a variety, not only of geographical areas, but size of agencies and things they focus on. And what's interesting is that whether it's a $3 million revenue agency or a $100 million revenue agencies, yes, there's differences, obviously, but there's a lot of similarities in some of the frustrations and challenges they're dealing with. So I love it. And, to me, what's really cool, my last comment, and if you have anything else you want to add, Allison, please do on this, is that not only is there a collective genius in groups like that of committed growth agencies, but we talk, problems are addressed, but the discussions around the solutions. And there is a difference, right? I mean, there are some groups, I'm not naming a group, but just groups of people, so to speak, that it's more about a venting session than solution seeking. And when you get abundance thinkers who know there's real issues, but they're going to talk about solutions to it, there's some pretty magical stuff that happens.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, you mentioned in the beginning too, that I'm pretty much, I'm a pretty open book.
Yeah.
I just feel like, being vulnerable. And so when you do that too, then you can be open and people can, they might have something really great to give you, because sometimes we have our blinders on, it's just like we're like that horse that has the blinders on and you can't see outside of it. And so to be able to be in part of that group, and then, like you said, not just be like that, session of just get it all out. There's some really great feedback and some help that can come out of that.
Yeah. And the vulnerability thing is a big issue. And Allison, I'm going to go ahead and say this, right? Like this is going to be a shock to you when I say this. There are more males in the industry in those positions than there are females. Am I okay to say that? Is that true?
That's very true.
And I will tell you, and again, it's interesting because obviously, I'm passionate. It's like we want more females in leadership positions. And I think it's happening slowly, and maybe we could have a separate discussion on that. But one thing, again, maybe I'll talk from the male perspective. Sometimes males don't like to share weaknesses because it feels like we're giving weaknesses, and I would never tell someone about what we're not good at. But when you get in the right room, and it's certainly smaller groups, and that trickle effects of, wait a second, this person shared this, I guess I can share this. That's when you actually get to solutions, right? Versus masking everything. We're good here, and this is good, and we're fine here, and
right.
You're lying to yourself, right? When you go, the truth of it is, we're really struggling with this. What could I do? And that's, I don't know where I was going with that, other than you were very vulnerable and open to different stuff, and it really opened great conversation. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that. All right, my last question. I know I'm going a little longer than if you have to, I'll be brief here, but my favorite question is this, and I try not to put a timeline on this, but because you mentioned you started at 18 as a receptionist, right? So, and now you're where you are today. So let's just say, in this imaginary world I'm making up here, that the 18-year-old Allison runs into the today Allison, and the 18-year-old Allison says, experienced, awesome Allison, if there's one piece of advice you could tell me right now as I begin this career, it would be what?
To have mentors.
To
have mentors. I think it is one of the only, it helped me tremendously because especially when you're young and you're new, you don't know. You're learning a business. You're learning um, the the education even behind the business.
Yep.
And so to have those mentors that you can lean on, that can help you, guide you, give you advice, coach, mentor, I mean, all of those things, but also maybe opening doors for you too, being able to help with that as well. Um, and it gives you that person too to go to, but they're not just going to be like your friend, they're going to give you some constructive, like feedback and say like, look, like, why did you do it this way? Or, but again, it's all about how to help you get you to that next, step in your
Yeah.
career. So yeah, I think mentors are huge. So that's one of the things now that I'm in this part of my career, I love to be able to help like other, especially young women
Yeah.
in the business, because there is not a lot of women that do commercial sales,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah.
But for me in general, it doesn't have to be insurance. It could be anybody. But yeah, I think mentors
Uh,
in the business and out of the business.
uh, First of all, there's never a bad or wrong answer to that question, but I always have to like it's just my favorite question to ask because I learn a ton, and then I think
Mhm.
about things in different perspectives because I agree. I mean, there's so much with that, and I think sometimes with younger people, maybe there's a level of fear or hesitancy, right? I'm nervous, I'm not worthy. But I think you expressed it really, really well. So here's if you're listening here and you're a young person getting in the industry, or I mean, I don't care. You can be experienced in this as well. Like, to
Mhm.
me, I'm always looking for people that are 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead of me, right?
Yep.
And sometimes it could be not even age, it's just other walks of life, like as you mentioned. And just surround yourself with this because I will tell you, this is not 100%, but when you find the right people and you seek the people that are successful people are generally successful for a reason. And it's not because they were just lucky. All right. They approach things the right way. And again, there could be people that are great mentors in relationships, in business, in finance, right? Find different scopes of this. But generally, if you're 18 years old, just using your example, and you come to someone and say, listen, I'm really looking to grow and develop. I really respect what you've done in this particular area. If I can find some time, either just to kind of see what you do or how you do it or ask you questions, there are very few true mentors that won't give some level of response to that to help you.
So
Um,
true.
you agree with that?
Oh my gosh, it's so
Yeah.
true. But you're right. I think that younger individual is like they're nervous. They're like, "Oh,
Mm.
they're busy. They're so successful. They don't have time for me." But we all choose how we spend our time. And so most of the time someone's not going to say no. Like you said, you can't say 100%, but yeah,
Yeah.
majority of the time people are going to say, yes, I would love to help. How can I help? And it's a coffee, it's a breakfast, it's a lunch, whatever it is, they usually are saying, yes, let me see how I can do.
Yeah. I mean,
Let me see what
I
I can do.
I think back and I had a conversation with an agency we work with, and there was 5 young producers that had a producer academy, and we did like 2 days, and we're talking about some different stuff, and sometimes their eyes are rolling back in their head, right? You try to slow things down. There's a lot coming at them, and I said, listen, we can sit and have this conversation again and again and again, and we will. I said, we'll follow up because it's important. I said, but the most important thing you can do is you're in an agency with some really cool people. Like, go connect with 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Be open, be transparent, and say, listen, if you truly desire this to grow and develop in this realm of business, for example, like, and you approach that with vulnerability and honesty, they're going to help you in some capacity, right? And by the way, as a mentor, and that's kind of where I'm at, like on both sides of this, just like you were talking about, Allison, like I'm still a mentee in many, many different areas, where it's books, podcasts, people, relationships, and I'm also a mentor now. It's kind of that middle. Like, you learn a ton by mentoring too, because sometimes you get a zeal or a zest back that maybe you've taken for granted because you've been in it
Yes.
so long, you know?
Yep.
So it really is a win-win. So my last take on this from an agency, I know you guys do a great job at night, is like, have conversations with people that can be mentors. Say, don't miss that opportunity. Talk to the younger people and say, please reach out to that, right? Foster that mentorship environment,
Hmm.
because the 18-year-old Allison is there somewhere and could really benefit from that. So Allison,
Yes.
any final comments before we wrap up here? Thanks so much for being on here today.
No, I don't think so. I think this was so awesome. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, I knew you would bring great value and you did not disappoint. You exceeded expectations, which were already very high.
Yes.
I didn't tell you that because I didn't want to put any pressure on you. But thanks so much, Allison. I know we will stay in touch. And for the agency leaders out there listening, thank you for being a listener. If this podcast, whether it's this episode or others, have helped you, inspired you, given you some tools, love a rating and review or share it with other agencies out there. Again, is our mission to make an impact, to build clarity, consistency, and a commitment to be that best version possible. And if you are a growth committed agency that wants to see what we're all about, please schedule a strategy call. There's a no obligation, just so we can get to know more about you, get to know more about us, and see if there's a long-term fit. So with that, thanks for being a listener and wish you all the best in your success. The Agent Leader Podcast is brought to you by the fine folks of the Rough Notes Company. They are publishers of the insurance industry's leading magazine and technical insurance content. Rough Notes magazine profiles successful agencies plus keen insights from respected experts on a host of must-know topics. Rough Notes Advantage Plus provides the tools to help your agency grow, providing authoritative information on complex coverage issues. Visit them and learn more at roughnotes.com.